Welcome into the Show 6 podcast, where we break down the Championship Series for Pokemon GO. In this week's episode, we discuss a variety of topics, beginning with the Orlando Regionals. I won't mince words here. Orlando had the makings of one of the best play Pokemon events of all time. In the end, though, a great darkness spread over sunny Orlando, eclipsing the entire event and spreading far beyond the Pokemon GO community. We'll talk about what we know, what we don't know, and how the outcome will ultimately shape the future of competitive Pokemon Go. We'll also discuss the first streamed event in LATAM, being Queretaro, and how a South African defended Cape Town and became the champion. We'll give you a preview of what to expect as the TPC region fires up their own events and our first impressions of the NAIC meta reveal. So if you're ready, good luck, have fun, and lock in. Welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode of the Show 6 podcast. As I alluded to in the intro, we do our best to break down the storylines, the players, and everything in between. And I couldn't do any of this without my co-host, Zzweilous. ZZ, welcome in.
Thanks for having me yet again, Speedy. There's a lot of breakdown this time around, I'm afraid, and not all of the pleasant nature that we're typically used to when discussing these episodes, where we're just celebrating achievements, celebrating victories, and celebrating our players, because Orlando happened, and Orlando was it was an event that brought the community together to essentially defend one of our own who earned a regional title and then got it taken away. And that individual is FireStar73. And even if you don't follow Pokemon Go PvP that closely, which obviously you do because you're listening to us right now, but there's a Moist Critical video that has more than 1 million views on that topic, is what I'm saying. So yeah, Orlando Regionals, one for the ages, if nothing else.
We need all of our Moist Critical fans listening to give us a like and let us know that you're interested in competitive Pokemon. And, as I was talking with you before we press record, ZZ, millions of people are finding out that we have competitive Pokemon tournaments. So I don't know if it's too soon to look at a bright side here, but I'll tell you what. Let's be honest, right? We're going to spend the most of this episode talking, or the majority, I should say, of this episode talking about Firestar and what happened in those grand finals. But there were a lot of other narratives, so let's kind of move through those really quickly because a lot of other trainers deserve a spotlight for their incredible performances, and then we'll get down to the nitty gritty and we'll answer all of the questions that we've seen posted. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, your notes are always so good, man. It says here, Tuzzy's attack on Florida. Our team, our production team, we called it the Samba Shuffle because a lot of these Brazilian trainers are coming in and they were dancing right onto the stage. Let's talk about Tuzzy and the invasion because this is actually a very solid performance from all of our Brazilian trainers.
Yeah, this is so interesting to me because typically you would expect the LATAM competitors to compete in the LATAM region. And there was the Queretaro regionals on the exact same weekend. But instead, the formerly known as LNDS, probably still known as LNDS crew around LNDS Rajev, TZ Steinar, LNDS Oreo, a bunch of talented trainers who made their way over to Florida to compete in Orlando. And the three names that I just mentioned all came top 5. So It was a very successful outing for our Brazilian friends. And yeah, the entirety of day 2 felt like a little bit of an international competition with Americans defending their home soil from the Brazilian onslaught of very, very talented trainers, as well as Semi85, who is not one of the Tuzzies, but as a Peruvian competitor, also with his, I think, career best finish in 5th place, part of that North America versus Latin America dynamic that played out in very exciting fashion.
I agree. It was definitely fascinating to watch. And given the history that we have, especially with our Brazilian trainers coming over to Pittsburgh and taking a award there, I definitely had, my NA bias was showing a little bit. And I definitely had a few jump scare moments I'm looking here at my DMs because I got a message actually from Inadequance, and I'm trying to see exactly where he said it. But essentially, he said, "I can't wait to see another trophy from NA go over to LATAM. That's going to be great." And Martine was trying to curse us, right?
This sounds like very much a Martine message. But yeah, it happened twice already this season where the North Americans couldn't really keep their auto invite and their gold medal in their home region, with not only TZ Steiner winning Pittsburgh, but also Stone Collection taking the Seattle title. So the Brazilians were trying to make it three, but they did not succeed because the two trainers in the finals were essentially just like they really felt at home beating up on the poor LATAM trainers, because I feel as if both of them, their claim to fame is also kind of not really being the strongest trainers in North America, but rather being the
Hmm.
strongest North Americans when it comes to beating up other regions, with Nighttime Clasher, obviously the LAIC champion, very well versed in taking down the international grades, and Firestar73, the other grand finalist, being the highest placing American at the last World Championships in Anaheim, California, coming seventh overall. So two trainers with certainly the accolades to back up their claim as two of the strongest trainers in the region, and also two of the best defenders of North America against players from abroad.
So let's do a brief recap, right, of our top three best finishing Brazilians. They all came in on the winner's side bracket for day number two. We did have Hard Jeff versus Firestar as the first matchup. We had TC Steiner versus Dunebug as our second matchup. And then we had LNDS Oreo versus Nighttime Clasher. So starting with the latter, LNDS Oreo was able to pick up a 2-1 over Rise. He was knocked to the loser side bracket by Nighttime Clasher. He was also able to beat Pranav and Toad with his Aegislash before falling to Firestar ultimately to end his tournament run. Then we had LNDS Hard Jeff. He had a notable win over Dunebug actually in round 7. I think I made the commentary on this. I said, you're going to have 6 medals slash trophies on each side of the stage. They have so much hardware, they might actually fall through that platform if they're not careful. He was also able to beat Frankie T52, a Florida local, Orlando native, actually, and Sammy. And then you had LNDST, or excuse me, TZ Steinar. He's had a lot of name changes frequently, so forgive me if I go back and forth. He also got a win over Dunebug. So Dunebug's 2 losses were both to Brazilians, it would appear. And he also beat Firestar before falling to Nighttime Clasher and then Firestar in the rematch. So very well played by all of our Brazilian players. And this was also, I know that it's become kind of like a meme in the NA community. We make jokes, right? Like, oh, well, as long as Flying Pizza isn't there, LNDS Hard Jeff has a chance. And that's like very much hyperbole, right? Because there was that one event. But just speaking for him, because I do feel like we're friends. Hard Jeff had to have felt pretty good about this performance in NA, as long as as well as the other Brazilians did too.
Yeah, like Rajev also just coming off his Curitiba win, so already like starting strong into this half of the season, or like this third of the season rather. And yeah, even though like there's not really like anything that needs to be earned in terms of worlds invites or worlds travel awards, because these trainers, like these are the exact LATAM trainers, the exact Brazilian trainers that are already essentially reigning the LATAM leaderboard. But it's still nice to get those points just to get the IC travel awards. Like we don't officially know yet for which international competition we are collecting points, and for which travel award we're collecting points as of now.
Mhm.
Speculation is that it's going to be LAIC, so it will be in region for Rajev Steiner and the likes. But still, positioning yourself well to get like that little bit of pocket money, surely, like that surely doesn't hurt. Plus, there's a decent amount of prize money as well for being a high finisher at traveling to regionals like this one.
Exactly. You have to keep the long run in mind, especially when it comes to our top trainers. This is always something that, to me, feels difficult to communicate on the broadcast because most of your players that are watching are not going to be competing for the travel award. They're not going to be top 8 because obviously being top 8 means there's only 8 of those people. So it's always interesting just to keep in mind the travel awards and what's at stake for performing well throughout the season, but then it doesn't feel like it's always appropriate to kind of mention that to the broader audience. So I really appreciate that you bring that up, especially on our high level show here. A couple other meta trends that I wanted to point out here. Let's talk about our top cut, right? 610 Hero, Shadow Polytoad, as well as Florges and Medicham. Dapper Discs bringing in the Galarian Wheezing and Murkrow. We had Toad with Aegislash and his Galarian Moltres. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know how you felt about what you were able to watch, ZZ, but I felt that Toad was our best Aegislash player in the event. He seemed very comfortable with the Pokemon, and I'd love to discuss that or any other meta picks that you thought were viable.
Yeah, I think Aegislash is probably the most interesting and exciting one because that has been legal for the Houston event already, and I think people like the Masked Asian were
And
trying it
Arrow.
out. Oh yeah, true. That was also a thing. Like people were trying to make it work, but they didn't place quite as highly as they may have liked to. And now we have Toad, a young, very talented trainer from North America, actually breaking into the top 8 for I think a career best finish. And that does go to show that Aegislash is actually a pick that can carry your team to unforeseen heights, but it needs to be mastered. And there's an argument going around that Aegislash is the highest skill ceiling Pokemon out there right now. And I'm like of two minds about this proposition, but
Okay.
I don't know. How are you feeling about this, Speedy? Like, what is your opinion on this Pokemon that is so unique in how it operates and that it has a unique form change to its gameplay?
So okay, so I have thoughts on this. So Aegislash essentially affords you a third shield in the game, and I look at it that way because it's so bulky. You can take a lot of super effective damage while you're charging. Positionally, I used to believe that you had to play it kind of like a superpower or wild charge user. You had to throw it out in the lead, use your move, and then swap and bank energy. But I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. I've changed my opinion on that. Um, I think there's a distinct difference between the players that really know how to play Aegislash and the ones that kind of know and they're kind of figuring it out. And you can tell that almost immediately. It's one of those Pokemon that's a very good litmus test. You can't fake your way through playing that Pokemon. That's just the way it is. I don't know if you've heard of this trainer, ZZ, but I bumped into someone named Kelsey K, and I had a discussion with her about Aegislash. She said that she's battled it a few times in GBL, and basically to the point I just said, she says when you go up against a good Aegislash player, it's very very hard to beat them, but when you go up against a mid tier player, you can figure your way out. It did better than I thought it would, but I was inspired after Orlando to play it in the Fantasy Cup, and I was honestly pretty surprised. So given my battles are still relatively mid elo range, I'm not going up against legends at this point, but I will say that gameplay wise it felt a lot more flexible than I thought, and I don't even have a particularly good one. Did I hit on your points, or do you have like a very different thought?
It's interesting because like I don't actually know exactly where I stand on each slash just yet. I'm probably there with Kelsey, who is known to be an expert in terms of form changing Pokemon, notably being a big Morpeko enjoyer. And it just slash it essentially switches from being a ghost type Bastiodon to a ghost type Morpeko in a way, and
Yeah.
that like the shield form is so bulky, such a high stat product, and the blade form is just a sweeper. And I personally am not very fond of Aegisla's playstyle, and that I believe that with how the shield form is essentially impenetrable in neutral situations, um, that interaction can make games very uninteractive in a way, especially the way charge attack priority works with Aegislash is that while in shield form, it will take its shield form attack stat and always lose charge attack priority, whereas in blade form, it will actually use its blade form attack stat and essentially always win charge attack priority. So if you farm up to 100 energy with Aegislash, even if you charge attack priority tie that Pokemon, you will win that tie as the non-Aegislash player, and you will deal your damage to the shield form Aegislash, which is essentially like the Pokemon doesn't care about that. If
Yeah.
you then try to charge attack priority tie them again on the second move, um, and they have already like fired a move that you blocked, and now they're in blade form, you will lose that tie that you just won, and you will be again in the disadvantageous position where you have to put up a shield or you're essentially deleted off the field. Which is like, okay, if I don't keep two shields for this Pokemon, I am in big trouble. And that is something that limits the counterplay to this Pokemon to one strategy, and that is just to keep two shields and pray that you encounter it in the right position. And while that is an effective enough strategy, it also it changes how the battles play out in a way that to me feels less dynamic than games that do not include Aegislash. So that is something
Mm.
that I disapprove of. Whereas
Okay.
I do agree that to properly pilot the Pokemon Aegislash, you do need to be aware of more things than just that interaction. You also need to know when to stay in the blade form for a little while, because in the blade form you have access to Psycho Cut as your fast attack, whereas in the shield form, you have access to the charging attack, quote unquote, appropriately so, which only deals one damage per use and charges up six energy rather than the nine energy you would get per Psycho Cut. So there's nuance to that. There's nuance to leveraging, especially like a low health Aegislash in an attacking sense. But just the way it forces one specific type of counterplay and nothing else makes it like a little bit two dimensional and rather gimmicky than really elevating the skill ceiling.
Interesting. Gimmicky is a strong word. But the thing is, I kind of see where you're coming from because I feel like a lot of our elite trainers can see through it and they aren't fooled by the Pokemon and they're able to maneuver around it. But it can be really uncomfortable if you're not prepared for it. So one series that I'm waiting to talk about, I noticed it here looking at the team comps, was the Aegis / mirror that we got between Alan and Toad. I'm not sure if you remember the series, but my goodness, this was insane. So Alan, Corviknight for Alligator Guzzlord, Aegislash, as well as Gorgeist, and Carbink, which is another wacky, bizarre pick. And then you had Toad with Shadow Quagsire, Wigglytuff for Alligator, Clodsire, Aegislash, and Galarian Moltres. And what I remember the most about this series is that Alan saw a team with Toad that was Shadow Quagsire, Hydro Cannon for Alligator, Earthquake Clodsire, Gyro Ball Aegislash, and he said, you know what? I'm gonna leave Carbink over and over and over, and somehow bro cooked.
I was very surprised by that decision, but I guess a carbink is a carbink is a carbink. So I don't know. Like this is such a weird matchup because like
Yeah.
when I look at a team of six, I always like my first attention is towards the neutrality that I can achieve with the Pokemon I select. And somebody who has a Carbink on their team of six, they obviously think differently from how I'd be thinking in that situation. And while I don't always follow the decision making in that situation, it is fascinating to watch, especially if you yourself are not involved and just can watch the carbinking on another person's team.
It's I've never heard it used as a verb, but that's honestly amazing. Yeah, that series was crazy, and I remember anticipating that a lot because I think Caleb and Soph were commentating that one, and I was like, oh, Aegislash is so much fun. I want to see a mirror match, and that's exactly what we got between those two players. But speaking of Carbink, speaking of Aegislash, I want everyone to kind of form their own opinions and let us know what you think of Aegislash itself. But I'd like to move on and discuss another Pokemon that looked really interesting. And we have it here in the notes. Diggersby returning to the meta. A lot of trainers looking for normal type coverage to wall off the ghosts are reaching for Wigglytuff. They're reaching for Licky Licky. We even had a Brick Break Furret on Steinar's team. But what the heck is up with Diggersby?
I think Diggersby is honestly incredible in the current meta, just because if you look at the Orlando top card, the two most common Pokemon are Fortress, mostly Shadow, and also notably a lot of Bug Bite Fortress at this regional, whereas previously Volt Switch was almost strictly preferred, as well as Corviknight. And Corviknight needs to have a solid, like, it needs to essentially be like raid IVs ish type of Corviknight, which most people don't run because there was a community there. You will have a proper low attack, high defense, high HP IVs on your Corviknight, but you need an elevated attack stat to make the Diggersby matchup even slightly competitive because you would then reach a sign attack breakpoint. But yeah, you have those two Pokemon, and then you also have Galarian Corsola in fifth place, actually. And all
Mhm.
those three Pokemon have an abysmal time into Diggersby. So three of the top five just get completely hard countered by Diggersby, and you really need to dance around majestically with all your options and all your flexible picks around this Pokemon to
Mhm.
even pull out a victory against the Diggersby team. So really limiting the team building and still having enough neutral play against Pokemon like Wigglytuff, even Pokemon like Shadow Quagsire. I don't even know whether two Aqua Tails knock out. Feraligatr, obviously like not the worst answer to a Diggersby, but you still can't ever farm that down because your Shadow Claws are double resisted. There's Licky Licky in the top 12. The Rollouts are resisted. You cannot Shadow Ball the normal type. So yeah, just a lot of utility, especially with the Mudshot, which does enable Diggersby to also take the Empoleon matchup on even energy without needing to bait or doing any funny shenanigans. And I believe that what held Diggersby back at the start of the season was the presence of Altaria. But if you look at this top cut in particular, there's like, what do I see? There's like one Altaria on Jigglypuff's team. Congratulations to Jigglypuff for his first top 16 placement.
Mhm.
But other than that, I don't believe there's any really super hard answer to Diggersby in this top cut. So that is like I guess like a Togekiss is also a relatively hard answer, but most of
Yeah.
the common picks are really just neutral to hard winning for Diggersby.
I think a lot of trainers were turned off by the Scorching Sands nerfs over the seasons too, because now it's only a 1 in 10 chance that you get your debuff. And I remember when Scorching Sands odds were a lot higher, that was a very, very oppressive attack. I believe that was, correct me if I'm wrong, was that back in the Claydol days? Were we Claydol gaming with Scorching Sands? I'm trying to remember.
I believe so. Like there was
Mm,
obviously
yeah,
I guess like
Claydol.
we were like rock tombing, ice beaming with Claydol mostly, but like
That's
just
true.
before I remember having Diggersby on my EUIC team and making like sometimes even the Azu matchup competitive by landing a scorching sense. Also like small correction, Dunebug also had an Altaria, I just didn't identify it at first because it is the Shadow Altaria. But yeah, there's like a
Mm.
couple answers to Diggersby, but even on Dunebug's team, four of the Pokemon just lose the head-to-head to Diggersby, and two of them lose hard. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
certainly. I think it's a breakout stat that we will see more of in future events.
Yeah, the durability really speaks for itself as well. I remember making the comment. There was actually a Diggersby versus Fraligator matchup, and I said, "Well, Diggersby can easily eat one of these Hydro Cannons, and it is at no risk whatsoever of being Shadow Clawed down because all those Shadow Claws are double resisted. Plus, you're getting to those moves really, really quickly. And Fire type coverage is something that is also severely lacking in the meta. The best answer we have outside of Fire Punch Diggersby is Incinerate Gorgeist, which Gorgeist invites its own litany of weaknesses, being a grass and ghost type. When you have normal and dark and flying and opposing Pokemon like that, so yeah, I think it's a very interesting bring, and I really appreciate the point you made about Altaria on the decline, Diggersby on the incline. It almost feels like, again, we talked about this a couple times. You have to look for what isn't in the meta or what is falling out of the meta and then recognize those windows as well. You can't just look at what is there. You have to look at the negative space, recognize what is lacking. So, very interesting teams here from our trainers. Steelix from Sammy. I just want to call that out one more time. I called it out in our previous episode. I got to mention it again. When you are not lined up against Quagsire, Steelix looks like a beast. And congratulations to Sammy. I believe this is, if not his best finish, this was one of his best top cuts ever in his entire career. So very, very well done there. All right, ZZ. We talked about Diggersby, and this whole time, as I'm sure a lot of people who are listening, this whole time I keep thinking about the Firestar situation because Nighttime Clasher and Firestar faced off in the grand finals. And from purely a team compositional perspective, I saw the Diggersby from Firestar as being a major, massive problem for Nighttime Clasher. So Nighttime Clasher's team, Corviknight, Shadow Quagsire, Shadow Fortress, as well as Licky Licky, Alola Ninetales, and Grumpig, and then Firestar with Shadow Fortress and Polion, Diggersby, Licky Licky, Togekiss, and Shadow Malamar. So I guess we could do the one of two ways. We could either get right into grants, or we can talk about Bug Bite Fortress.
Yeah, I was. This was actually the exact next thing that I would have mentioned. That Diggersby and Bugbyte Fortress, they just look like a relatively unbreakable core into Nighttime Clash's team. Because with Bugbyte, and I believe that is the main reason why some top players like Firestar, like Nighttime Clasher, did switch over to the Bugbyte on Fortress. With Bugbyte on Fortress, Quagsire becomes a very playable, if not slightly positive matchup, rather than a negative one, as we were used to with the World Switch. Um, so between that being a decent matchup now, between Bug Bites just shredding through the Grumpig on Nighttime Clash's team, between Fortress resisting all the charge attacks available on Nighttime Clash's Alolan Ninetales, which did opt for Dazzling Gleam rather than Chilling Water as its coverage move.
Mhm.
It's like very difficult to bring any of the clear answers to Diggersby without opening yourself up to a big Bug Bite Fortress weakness. So to find neutrality in this matchup, um, both players actually relied on their Corviknight, or like, no, not both players. Nighttime Clasher relied on his Corviknight a lot,
Mhm.
whereas Firestar had the Bug Bite Fortress, which essentially had play into every single Pokemon. Even the Corviknight in some situations, it wasn't as bad as you would imagine it could be. Just because like Corviknight, while being a defensively sound wall to Bugbyte Fortress, it takes a long time to really just get the fortress off the field. So sometimes you were able to just like build up energy, maybe debuff the Corviknight once, and then save the bug bites for later. Because being a one turn fast attack is just so flexible if you have to get rid of that little bit of health that may be on a lot of Pokemon in endgame scenarios, and that is something that Firestar played to perfection in the series against Nighttime Clasher.
Such a tough Pokemon to overcome. But Nighttime Clasher, so funny anecdote. Before he got into the grand finals, he took on TZ Steinar, and that series, I believe, went to 5 games. And that was such a labyrinth to cast through with Alpha Phi because there were so many switches, so many pivots. There were no home runs. There were no blast burns connecting into fortresses. There were no knockouts that were very obvious to call out. It was very much in the margins. And I caught up with NTC after the event, and he said, that series I had against Steinar, I think that was the best PvP I've ever played. And I have to agree with him. That series was absolutely insane, back and forth. If you have a chance and you want to watch some very high level Pokemon Go with tons of switches, lots of energy management, the wind conditions shifting like the sands beneath their feet, you need to check out that series between those two players. But these trainers fought through so much to get into the grand finals, and Nighttime Clasher are very impressive. But I wanted you, if you feel so inclined, to highlight Firestar's miracle run leading into this because you actually lined up all the opponents, and I couldn't believe it when I first took a look at this.
Yeah, let me quickly cycle back to my notes, but it is interesting because I mentioned going into this episode how okay, the specialists in our grand finals were actually probably best suited to take on all the Brazilians, and Firestar's run included um, matches against Korlash, against Rajiv, against Oreo, and against Steinar, and he beat all of those. He beat Rajiv twice, and against Steiner he lost one to drop down to losers, but then got the revenge in the lower bracket. And beyond that, the most prominent names in terms of North Americans are Nighttime Clasher in the grand finals, obviously resetting the bracket, and then maybe winning, maybe not winning. My eyes say he won that too, and that is still up for debate. And also beating Nighttime Clash's brother Sustenance Eater. I believe it was in the group finals, perhaps.
Mhm.
Certainly it was a day one matchup. And yeah, that is like I would not I haven't checked, but I would not be surprised if all of these trainers were within the top 10 championship points of their respective region. And yeah, like a run like that, you could tell me that that was an international or maybe even a world's level competition, and I would not be entirely surprised.
When I walked into the venue on Friday, it was one of those situations where I flew out a day early to film, and we wanted to focus a lot more on player storylines and focus a lot more on individual opinions, feelings, competitive history. It just zooming in a bit more on the players. I know in Houston we played a lot of games. We played cornhole. We did the spoon relay race. We did the Pokedex with the UFO stuff. We did a bunch of fun things. We wanted to be a bit more esports centric, right? And I feel so silly at times because whether it's bumping into Beelzeboy in the line, waiting to get into register at the Pokemon World Championships in uh, in Anaheim, or it's like what happened to me bumping into Firestar on Friday in the venue in Orlando. And you know, the guy is just all smiles. He's all happy. He's like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm really excited to be here. You know, I got here early. I just wanted to settle in, and I might do the challenge, but we'll see. And if you need me to film anything, like I'm available. You know, I can jump in and be a guest on your segments." I said, "Oh, Firestar, that's great." And I said, "Well, we're focused on some specific players. We have a list that we need to look through, and I need to wait for them to be ready." And Firestar was not on the list. Of course, this is before everything that happened. But that's just been my experience with him. Every single time I bump into Firestar, he's so positive. He's ready to go. He's got that like wide-eyed look to him that we used to have, you know, back when we first started competing and everything was new and fresh and exciting. And yeah, I don't know exactly where I'm going with the story, but I just wanted to provide that feedback that we came in targeting certain players, and then Firestar ended up being one of the brightest stars, no pun intended. But yeah, what a run from him to climb through that bracket. And we asked several times on the cast too. We said, "Is this Firestar's time? Is this his time to win an event?" Because he's so impressive. He's ruthless in that loser side bracket. I mean, he literally just crushes people and throws them into the wind when he's on the loser side. So seeing him come into day number two on the winner's side, I mean, there was hope there, right? There's a lot of hope, and then you saw trainers like Hard Jeff, like Nighttime Clasher, in that top cut, and we said, well, Firestar's good. I don't know if he's that good, right? So to see him make it all the way to the grand finals was absolutely insane, and both trainers have so much merit. But Azizi, I guess we could recount the grand finals. To be honest, even though I watched it in person, a lot of the battles are kind of a blur. I just remember going into that decisive game five of the reset.
I will say that I have not mapped out the play by play the same way I would have had for any ordinary regional, because even
Mm,
though the play that we did witness was impressive and would have deserved highlighting, I feel as if with the circumstances overshadowing, especially those final moments of the tournament, I don't actually know whether people are like super interested in like just getting every single detail of that run. Like there are like obviously mechanical moments that you can highlight. Oh, once Nighttime Clasher pivots in a Shadow Quagsire, what
mhm,
does Firestar do? He doesn't immediately counter swap a Togekiss, but he does a little bit of bug bite damage with his Shadow Fortress to build up some energy, put the Quagsire maybe into a better range for where a knockout is possible, and just like saving that energy on the super potent Pokemon for the end game is always so helpful. And because of Nighttime Clasher's Quagsire also not having Stone Edge, the Togekiss is actually able to so successfully and like easily tank two Aqua Tails and then pace to the Aura Spheres in an adequate time where just keeping the switch advantage is easy for Firestar to accomplish. But like all of those plays, all of these mechanical details, I feel as if they really fall short just capturing this moment because like what ended up happening was that in the end game, Firestar did have a solid lead. He played the mechanical part of that game to perfection. He had a Hydro Cannon banked on his Empoleon to throw on a
Mhm.
low health Corviknight. Um, the move was connecting. He was visibly just like shaken from the experience because this was a grueling lower bracket run. Like he had to take out half a dozen of the best players in the world. He had to reset the bracket against Nighttime Clasher. He went 0-2 down in, not 1-2 down, I believe, in the final series of the weekend. He managed to tie it up. He managed to maneuver himself into a winning position in that game five. And there's so much pressure. There's so much adrenaline going through a competitor in that moment, especially somebody who hadn't been at that point of the competition before. Obviously, Firestar is an accomplished player, but um, as you mentioned, one of the narratives was that he never won a championship before, and this was the moment. Caleb in the podcast, or not in the podcast, in the broadcast, much rather, pointed out like just after Firestar got up to celebrate, like the narrative was, oh, he was always in the running for best competitor in North America to never have won an event, but not anymore because this is Firestar's moment. This is his event. He won it. He earned it. He celebrates, and he celebrates very naturally. There's like no force beyond what just goes through a person's body when they're like really high on adrenaline, really ecstatic, just like rushing to take off the headphones, just tossing them onto the table with some force, but not with exaggerated force, not whatsoever. Just like, okay, this guy is really just ready to jump up and celebrate his biggest play Pokemon achievement to date. One of probably the happiest moments in his life. Like, that is like, if you have a passion and you achieve something great in that passion, you should be this happy. This is what we love to see, and this is what Play Pokemon loves to see. If you like look at any intro to any regional competition, the whole Show 'em What You Got song is playing, and you see the pop-offs, you see the excitement, you see the emotion from all the competitors, and in that moment, Firestar was delivering even like a relatively tame moment in that category. It wasn't even like crazy. He didn't like, I don't know, like jump into the crowd or anything. He was just like, okay, I put my fist in the air. I won this event. I'm so happy. I just jump up from my chair because there's so much excitement going on, and I shake my opponent's hand because obviously like this was a great series of battles, and none of the competitors had any reason to assume any bad sportsmanship on the part of the other. And I believe that is not even what is being discussed here. What is supposedly being discussed right after this very happy, very exciting moment, both for Firestar and the audience, is the toss of the headphones. That was then apparently like we don't have official communication towards that, but what we heard like from people who were there, who were like on the ground getting the info as best as they could, apparently the toss of the headphones was too forceful, and that then resulted in game five being overturned and counted as a game loss for Firestar, losing him the set and the tournament essentially while he was mid celebration. And that I personally deem the lowest moment in competitive Pokemon Go's history.
I don't know if I could have said it better. Yeah. Um where to start? Okay, so just to humanize Firestar a bit more for everyone that's listening. And I think that's the one unique perspective that I can offer. And I will go into to what I saw being there at the event behind the scenes. I'll just tell you what I saw. So let's back up just a little bit. So just to humanize Firestar a little bit further, before the grand finals interview, I remember Firestar and NTC walking into the lounge. NTC, everyone knows him. Everyone adores Nighttime Clasher, right? He's very fun. I can't tell where his brain is at any given moment. I don't know if he's thinking about Brawl Stars, if he's thinking about opening a pack of cards, if he's thinking about lunch, or if he's thinking that he's in the grand finals in Orlando. I don't know what he's thinking, but he's always a good time. And he walks in so nonchalant, so cool. Behind him walks Firestar. Firestar, his hands are shaking, His teeth are chattering. His palms are sweating. He's got goosebumps. I could see goosebumps on his legs. He was like on a different planet, just trying to bring himself back into the moment for that grand finals interview. And he composed himself so well because when the camera actually comes to us and we do our interview, he's very well spoken. He's very eloquent. Guys, I'm telling you, I've done a lot of these grand finals interviews. I've been seated right next to a lot of these players. Firestar was probably the most emotional player I've ever had the honor of talking with, right? The passion was there. And I love that you use that word. The passion just it leaks out of him. So when he's in that grand finals position and he is literally like we'll have the video up on the YouTube version when he literally has the headphones, they're coming down. It's past a 90-degree angle. He's probably at like, a 35-degree angle and he releases the headphones at that point. It felt like any other celebration. I watched Wadaj do it when he won NAIC. Pataman has done it, as you pointed out on your socials. A lot of players have done this. This is not unusual. This is not weird. This is not unique to Firestar. And when you compare it against other performances, and I don't or pop offs, I don't mean to compare directly in like a bad sense, but think of Marcus, aka Arceus Aurelius, who literally goes down on his knees and is like losing his mind. Pokemon loves that stuff. Or you have Marto who just like holds his arms out wide and is just like over the stage, just bearing down. Um, these things are part of the fuel of what makes competitive Pokemon great. And so I've heard a few things, right? And I want to lead in by saying that I've heard a lot of conflicting reports. I've heard a lot of rumors, a lot of things that are floating in the airwaves right now. We're recording this episode at 3 o'clock Central Time, US, on April the 10th. So if there's going to be an announcement for Pokemon, it hasn't come out yet. We don't know. I believe that you were able to check the point distribution, and that has still not been finalized. So we can work with what we know publicly, and publicly, Firestar has said that earlier on in the event, I don't know if it was Saturday or if it was Sunday, but at least once he got a warning from the judges because he apparently banged the table or he released his headphones too early or he had some kind of mistreatment of equipment, right? However, they define that. So this almost feels like it was a follow up on whatever warnings he had gotten, if it was a judge's call, which we still don't know. And I also want to highlight this, right? We blame TCG for a lot of stuff. Let's do it one more time. Earlier on Sunday, TCG had a similar issue. And essentially, if I could put this in Pokemon Go terms, imagine you're in a decisive game 5 and your opponent sends out a lead, you win the lead, and then they swap in Altaria and you have a Bastiodon. And you click the Bastiodon, and as soon as you click it, you take your headphones off, you throw them down, and you're like, yes, I've got perfect alignment. I'm probably going to win. That's what this player did. He took his headphones off once he drew the right card. He knew that the board state was what he needed, but he had not performed the following plays in order to win the game. So it was an early celebration. It messed up the board state because some of the cards got scattered, and he was given a game loss. He actually ended up playing again later on that day, which is also ironic. He returned to the stage. So I think there was a lot of pressure on the team there. I won't say specifically what team, uh, on the team overall to be consistent in their rulings. But I think the context of the two situations, if that's the case, was completely ignored. Completely ignored. It's like an orange and an apple. Sure, they're both fruits, but they are wildly different in terms of their composition and flavors too. So I don't know, ZZ. There were tons of rumors, and I'll get the whole spiel about what I saw backstage. But I'm wondering if you want to weigh in on what I've said so far.
Yeah, I think this is very important context, both the prior warning, and I will say that issuing warnings for example, just like punching the desk with your fist, I think that is entirely warranted. And if that
Sure.
happens, I think a warning should be issued. Because I've heard like reports not directed towards Firestar specifically, but just like reports from players on the ground who felt like a little intimidated or just put at unease from people acting out their frustrations
It's it,
semi-violently against the equipment.
it's a show of
So that
aggression.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And we don't really want to see that during a tournament. But that is so different from the sheer innocent joy and excitement that was on display when Firestar popped up for his celebration. And as you mentioned, the TCG situation, that's so apples and oranges, just because like the Firestar thing happened essentially like when the Hydro Cannon animation from his Empoleon taking out the Corviknight as Nighttime Clash's final Pokemon, when that wrapped up, and it was like all the inputs were already done, nobody could do anything anymore. He didn't even need to touch the phone anymore. Everything was just like, okay, we see the Pokemon faint and we see the you win screen, and like half a second before the you win screen, the headphones came off. So it can't really be that. It can't really be the same ruling of like, oh, the game wasn't over and you disrespected your opponent. It can really only be like the headphone toss being too forceful. But I would still maintain that it wasn't overly forceful. He just had like a lot of energy that needed to be unleashed in any manner, and that was a very celebratory manner. And I don't believe that the headphones were damaged, and they didn't even make it halfway across the table, and they didn't hit anybody. They were just like, okay, there's like some force behind that, but like
Mm.
really like so far from even being noticeable if you were just watching this casually. Because again, so many of those, especially like in those high stakes moments, you expect something like that to happen. um and again, Pokemon even welcomes that. So this just felt very inconsistent, ironically, with all the prior situations in which the essentially identical situation was handled very differently. And I think, even though like I do not want to point fingers at the individual judges because we do not know whether they made the call, but I still do wonder how it can, like how people can just go through with that situation in the moment without having a proper discussion around it. Because if you watch the video clip that is still up on YouTube or the Twitch VOD, it cuts away from Firestar like around 50 seconds after the play wraps up.
Mhm.
And the last frame of Firestar you see is him turning his head towards the judges in disbelief. So it appears as if a very quick and likely rushed decision was made to overturn that game result in that moment. And I just think that Pokemon owes it to its competitors to not make any hasty decisions, but rather really deliberate around that issue and ask everybody who could possibly weigh in how they observed the situation. And I know for a fact that Nighttime Clasher, as Firestar's opponent, was as surprised as Firestar that this ruling was upheld the way it was. And Nighttime Clasher did mention uh, in Discord, I believe that is something that you can still look up in, I believe, Home Slice Henry's server,
Mm.
um, where he said that I tried to sign the match slip acknowledging my loss, but they took it away from me. So even Nighttime Clasher, who would have been the beneficiary of that ruling, decided that he didn't want that, but was overruled by Big Pikachu, essentially. You take this win even though you do not want it, which is just
Yeah.
insane to me. Like, this is like the person who has the most to gain from Firestar getting the game lost there. And even he says, like, this is stupid, this cannot stand. And I don't know, like, we are essentially like the community is united 100-0 on this issue. We haven't heard back from Pokemon yet, so apparently it's not finalized into either direction. But even it taking so long and Pokemon allowing this issue to spiral to to such a talking point that goes way beyond the competitive Pokemon sphere, I think it's very negligent. And it also, it's just like an aspect that we didn't touch on yet. It really just like throws the judges under the bus, because those judges, will not name them, but people know who they are and they know how to be awful to them on social media if they want to. And I don't believe that many people who are really core members of our competitive community have been doing that, because we are grateful for people who volunteer to make those events happen. But I just believe that Pokemon holds a responsibility for their staff, and they're not honoring that responsibility by just leaving this all in limbo for so long and essentially allowing online harassment to thrive, especially with how this spiraled beyond our core community.
I think Pokemon in general is not a very reactionary media brand, right? They tend to let a lot of things just pass because they recognize the outrage cycle rarely lasts too long. People might be upset about a certain thing, whether it's brand representation or how the players are handled or whatever. But typically, it washes away in a few days to a few weeks. So it's very unusual for Pokemon to make a big scale response, especially to something like this. I feel like even Niantic is more willing to say, hey, look, we screwed up this event. You can get a free raid pass, whatever. But Pokemon rarely apologizes for something. And a lot of it is just how the brand is managed, right? Obviously, the most valuable brand in the world. They've done a lot of things really well, and you have to respect the leadership style. But I agree with you. I can't help but feel that this is something that could have been nipped in the bud almost immediately. And instead, we have like these spiraling conspiracy theories that are starting to develop. I've seen one that apparently the judges were working with NTC to like rig the game so that he would win. I'm going to tell you guys right here, Nighttime Clasher is not capable of that. That is not in his wheelhouse as a person. And to confirm ZZ's sentiment, this isn't just something that he posts on Discord. After the event ended, I caught up with NTC in front of his friends, in front of other top players in a big group. He said, I don't want to win this way. I don't think it's right. I want Firestar to have this, and I tried, like you said, to finalize the match slip, and I wasn't allowed to. So NTC is very much on the community side, even though like man, what a crappy position to be in, even if you're Nighttime Clasher. What a terrible position to be in.
Yeah.
I just ask that everyone extend the same kindness that you're showing to Firestar to Nighttime Clasher and to the other players because they really are kind of like everyone's is like suffering in unity for Firestar and because of the situation. Um, but yeah, what a crazy development. And you and I talked about this before we turned the camera on. That Moist Critical video has a million views now.
It's
And
bizarre.
it's so weird because we seriously this is such a low-hanging fruit and such an obvious decision for the judges and the staffing team and everyone involved that it's it's like pure outrage fuel. This is like kerosene, right? This is
Yeah.
so volatile that everyone can just jump on it and say, "Oh, I know I know immediately what the right decision is here. I don't even need to
Yeah.
think about it. I don't even need to know Pokemon. I could tell you this is the bad decision, right?" So it's been a disaster. I'll give you a quick recap here of what happened backstage. Again, I'm only speaking from my personal experiences, and although I uh, do contract work for Pokemon, I don't know all the details. I don't know if there's an investigation. I don't know what the ruling's going to be. I don't have insider knowledge. All right. Let me just preface that by saying that, and these opinions are all my own, and they're not the opinions of Pokemon or the production company. But I'll tell you what I saw. So leading up to the grand finals reset, Phoebe was hard at work writing down anecdotes for each of our trainers because he was really excited to do this trophy presentation. He had a nickname for Steinar. He was the Brick Breaker, right, because of his Brick Break ferret. He had anecdotes he was writing for Nighttime Clasher and for Firestar, and he was really workshopping this. He was very excited. And Phoebe was ready to do this awards show. I think it was the first one that he would have ever done in his career. So he was very hyped. I go into the lounge area because I'm going to lead the show outro. And I'm like, okay, I'm looking through my cue cards. These are the things that we're going to talk about. This is what we're going to discuss. The big news of the weekend, ZZ, was supposed to be the NAIC meta reveal. That was
Yeah.
like the news. And I had worked with the production team on that graphic all day. And I was like really excited for it. Put a lot of work into how it was designed and how it looked. And I was like, man, this is going to be so good. People are going to be hype. Maybe we should get a crowd shot because people will be excited. That's how I was thinking about it.
Well, oh man. This
Well, So we watched game 5, and we immediately see the Firestar pop off. And I had my IFB in, which is my little headset, and I've got my notes. I'm like, okay, I'm hyped. I sit down, I kind of adjust my suit, and I'm sitting there, and Caleb and Soph go back on screen. And I'm like, okay, they're just, they're vamping, they're kind of filling time. We're getting the award set up. And I'm like, wait, they're talking for a long time. This is kind of weird, they're just keep on going and going, just filling air. And and then I get a text, and it's so frantic that some of the words are misspelled. It basically just says, um, there's a problem. We might not have a winner. Firestar DQ'd because of celebration. And I'm like, this is this is really weird. I don't know what's happening. So a few seconds after that, I'm waiting for more information to come in. A few seconds after that, I get production in my ear, and they say, we're cutting awards. We're going straight into show closing. We're cutting out this, and that. We're gonna do these points, and we're gonna pilot through it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really weird. And then Phoebe comes in, and Phoebe is basically sent to the lounge without knowing what's going on either. Phoebe walks in. He says, "What's going on? Why are we going straight to lounge?" I said, "Phoebe, I just got word that Firestar might have been DQ'd because of a celebration. So the staff is deliberating this, judges, production, whoever is talking about this right now, and we're just going to do show closing." And Phoebe's expression goes from really excited to do the trophy ceremony to like furious. He's really upset. He's like, "What do you mean? I don't understand." I said, "Phoebe, I know, but production says we have 20 seconds. So you need to sit down and we need to smile." So he sits
Oh,
down.
Lord.
We go into the show closing. I thought Fee did a wonderful job. We tried to be positive. We did the meta reveal. That was really fun to talk about as well. We did the show closing. And of course, when the camera comes on us, right, I say, wow, that Orlando Grand Finals gave us everything we could have asked for and more. Because what else do you
Yeah,
say? What
yeah,
else do you say?
yeah. It certainly gave us more than we asked for. That is certainly the case. Oh man.
It was way more.
Ah,
So to conclude here, so we do the closing, we wrap, they go to bumper, replay footage. And then I immediately get up, Phoebe and we walk over. And what I see is like this swarm of people all on the Go side, right? Because we've got a big broadcast. We've got production guys standing around, we've got judges coming in and out, walking around. We got players who are waiting outside of the tarped off areas. And it's like a beehive. Everyone's just walking around, going place to place, talking. Everyone's having these discussions. I'm talking with the other commentators. I'm hearing rumors that I don't know are true or not. I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that. And then I look over, and just behind the curtained area is Firestar with his face in his hands, sobbing, sobbing, destroyed. And you have like this rotating door of people that walked by and like tried to talk to him, and he was just doing his best to try and listen, but he was just destroyed. And for what went on for probably an hour, he sat back there just in pieces, right? And I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, because this is again just like the reality of the situation. But what should have been one of the happiest moments of his entire career, maybe even his life, became this like roller coaster that just nosedived into like worse situation than he could have hoped for. So eventually, myself and a few others, we walk over to talk to Firestar, and I won't name him in case he wants to remain anonymous. But one of our close friends basically told him, said, "Look, you won up on stage. You played so well. I don't know what's going on with the deliberation." And of course, this is again not an official opinion. This was friend to friend, right? This is not an official statement. But he said, "In my heart, you won. My opinion is that you did really well, and nobody can take away your performance. So we'll just wait to see what happens next. But for now, I don't want you to sit backstage and feel sad about what you missed out on. I want you to go greet the people out on the floor who support you and who are waiting just as earnestly as you are to figure out what's happening. And I want you to go be with them and actually be in that support group and not just here by yourself, essentially." So We walk out with Firestar, everyone claps, but it's still very somber. And then Firestar is able to, group up with his friends and walk away. And again, guys, like discussions with the other players, discussions with Nighttime Clasher. This is out of the players' hands, right? It's out of my hands as a commentator too. And I don't know ultimately who's responsible. And I hope that I didn't shoot myself in the foot for anything that I said here, but um we're still waiting for some kind of decision, some kind of announcement, something to be passed down. And I feel like Firestar and our community in general deserves an explanation. And I really hope that's what we get. I know that's not the modus operandi for Pokemon, but I really hope that's what we get because I don't know, ZZ. We had the space launch, we had Artemis take off, and I feel like just like the rocket, this drama has reached escape velocity. It's come out of Pokemon Go. It's come out of esports. It is in the broader social discussion, and it's crazy to see that this has blown up so much. And it feels like everyone who watches the footage, if that's what the real situation is, everyone can immediately tell that
Yeah,
this should have gone one way.
yeah. There's little to add here. One thing that I will want to say is that I truly do hope that Pokemon considers how Firestar took this decision against him, this major injustice, as is the only way to frame it, because Firestar went out of his way. Like he posted like thank you to the judges. Do not harass the judges. These people are doing their job. It's not their fault. It's out of their hands. Please be civil, be kind to each other. And he's only ever been going about this in a modest way, in a positive way, to the degree you can expect somebody to be positive about something like this happening to them. Um, and yeah, I think the composure that Firestar demonstrated in the wake of this is something admirable, something that should be looked up to. And I don't know what will ultimately be the reasoning of any internal decision as to where we go with this, it's going to be whether the ruling is going to be upheld, whether it's going to be overturned, whether we'll have two champions, because I would imagine that there may be difficulties towards like stripping Nighttime Clasher of the first place that was awarded to him. Um, but I just truly hope that Pokemon looks at the merits of the situation and looks at the human being that they wronged, because this is not what Pokemon should stand for. And if you use your energy to make Pokemon stand for that, for essentially it's like spitting in the face of your player, then I don't know, you're in the wrong spot. Like somebody with some empathy should make this decision is what I'm thinking. And yeah, the entire community is heartbroken over this. And another thing that I'm actively wondering is how they will treat this for the upcoming regionals, because there's going to be future broadcasts. There's going to be Prague, there's going to be LA, and there's going to be casters who will be seated behind their desks, tasked with talking about the Orlando Regional Championship. And you cannot expect a single one of your casters to pretend as if Nighttime Pleasure won the Orlando Regional Championships. And again, this is nothing against Nighttime Pleasure. This is solely against the decision against Firestar. But people will have a reaction to something that is obviously false. And you cannot expect us to just accept a new reality that essentially deceives our lying eyes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope there's a resolution. I hope it comes quickly. And I believe this is a very, very easy decision to make. And the fact that it hasn't been made yet is already concerning.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Again, I'm not clear on where the decision came from. I'm not clear on. Well, obviously, Pikachu has the ultimate decision making power here, but I'm just not clear. And I hope that since the event ended, I hope that the time between now and then has been spent investigating, trying to figure out how this decision came to be, and hopefully putting some scaffolding in place so that something like this doesn't happen again. Because I mean, it totally stole the show, and it totally just overshadowed literally everything else that happened that weekend. Nobody's talking about the incredible series with NTC and Sinar. Nobody's talking about the come from behind win from Firestar or Sammy Steelix. Nobody's talking about any of that. And it's like a disservice to the players, right? Because it should be about the players, but it's just, it is, but in the worst way. As Most Critical said on his video, he's got a flair for the dramatic, but he did say that if this decision stands, that competitive Pokemon Go should just be shuttered and closed down. So there's that.
like like the thing is, like even though like that is not going to happen, I can easily see how competitors will now think twice about going out there again and competing, or even about being happy on stage visibly, because apparently you can be penalized for that. And that is just like such a like this is such a bad thing to do to yourself and to your brand. And I don't know why competitive Pokemon Go is in self-destruction mode. It really shouldn't be. And I just hope that I know that there's a lot of advocates for the right cause in this scenario, and I just hope that their voices are being heard, because you can like nobody can do this without their players. That is literally like the backbone of the competition. If you don't have players, you have nothing.
Speaking of self destruct, ZZ, I feel like we're always in self destruct. I feel like if it's not the PvP update that falls flat on
Uh,
release, or if it's not the bugs that are happening prior, or it's not a new release getting dropped and then it's banned immediately, or it's just not meta viable. If there's not something wrong, then we're not talking about competitive Pokemon Go. And it's really sad that we're kind of like, I feel like we have been dragged through the mud. I want some good news for a change. Can I just say that? I
I'm,
want some
I'm
good news.
I'm so on board with that sentiment because it's been a rough year. It's been
It's
a
been
rough year, and
rough.
I still believe in the potential of this. Like you've seen the passion from the community in the wake of this. Like everybody came together. There's so many more people than I believed would still care about this. Even Zionic briefly came out of retirement to then immediately announce that he's pivoting over to Pokemon Champions, which I cannot blame him for, because again, all the news that come out of Pokemon Go are like it's not great, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Like we're still alive, we're still kicking, we're still hoping for the best, and we're still like just like trying to be a community that stands up for each other, and I believe that's already quite a valuable quite a valuable feat. And
Yeah.
yeah, like we're not going anywhere unless you make us.
Yeah. We've survived this long. We'll continue surviving, right? Uh but yeah, my goodness. I just want like I want some good news. I want, oh, the game works. I want, oh, we're doubling sign up numbers, or I want, oh, we're getting this new mechanic added to the game. We're getting something exciting and something good to happen.
Okay,
I want
picture
that so
this.
badly.
Picture this. They managed to iron out all the kinks of the PvP refactor. They have a very successful 2026 Worlds with all the eyes on the competitive scene. And then we get a huge September update with an entirely new PvP system that will be introduced during Worlds. And everybody will flock towards Pokemon Go and all the exciting new content that comes with this change. And all of a sudden, we'll have like 300 people at a regular regional. How about that? Just manifest it. There's nothing that indicates that this is going to happen, but it could happen. There is the possibility for it. And I don't know, maybe just we just need a lucky break. Um but yeah.
You know, ZZ, I didn't know what to put on my Christmas list this year, but now I do. It's going
All
straight on my
right.
list. Yeah. So
Okay.
thanks for that.
Make sure to not end up on the naughty list, and you may be in luck.
Mm. That's fair. Also, I'll add on there a couple of bullet points. I'll add Speedy qualifies for Worlds in parentheses not washed, and then I'll add ZZ wins an event in parentheses hopefully Worlds. That's what I'm gonna write. Okay. How about that?
I would
How about
take
that?
that. When's your next event you compete at?
We'll see. So right now on the docket is NAIC. That one is for sure. But I am also eyeballing Indianapolis, so we're gonna see
Oh.
what the flights look like and what all that boils down to. But yeah, that's a possibility. All right.
Well, if you need any team building advice, any Piloswine advice, I will certainly have my DMs open.
I
Um,
I don't know if Pilot is gonna work in NA. I don't know.
it's unlikely probably, but
Yeah,
maybe there's some other tech that will be discovered by then.
yeah,
But
we'll
yeah,
see. Well, ZZ, I'm not sure if there's much we can add. I really wanted to get my personal experience on the record, and I'm glad that we were able to air our points. We're gonna have clips of Firestar Celebration of the maybe a thumbnail of the Moist Critical video, any kind of assets I can think of. We'll throw those all up on the YouTube version. So if you are enjoying the show, make sure to follow on any podcast platform, but also check out our YouTube version as well, and we'll get that uploaded ASAP. But ZZ, speaking of overshadowing, I almost feel like this is what a lot of people were tuning into, but we still have a lot of other content to cover. If you're
it's
ready,
true.
maybe we should move on to some of our other very exciting topics.
Yeah, we should do that, and I think the most obvious choice to start off with would be the Queretaro Regional Championships, which happened at the exact same time, and they were also featured through an official stream for I believe the first time. And that is an exciting new development that I hope continues and will also continue to be refined. Because while I tuned in a couple of times, one thing that immediately stuck out to me is that when the matches were broadcast, they did not deliver a graphic of the six Pokemon on the respective competitor's team, which
Mm,
I always like to see all of them at a glance because that can inform me of like, okay, what could be strategies that they're thinking of? Like, are they building their line because they want to be ABB to a certain threat on the opponent's team? What could be their next adjustment? And we haven't had that yet, but we had a stream. And I will say that I'm a little ashamed that I did not watch it much further than just like
mhm.
the couple of glimpses because I don't know, it was a busy week. We would have gotten out more episodes earlier if it wasn't a busy week. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm like kind of feeling guilty about not being able to do the Querétaro champions justice, but we do have a newly crowned regional champion in Gabor Herca,
Mm.
who is a Mexican native who also was a frequent opponent of mine in GBL this season and certainly a very strong player, coming first with a very meta team featuring Galarian Corsola, Medicham, Corviknight, Shadow Quagsire, and Voltswitch Shadow Fortress, as well as the omnipresent Wigglytuff that did top the usage charts in Querétaro's top 16.
Yeah, I want to make a quick distinction here. So while it was not, this is what I was told, right? While it was not an official broadcast, it did have official resources. So
Oh,
if because we didn't get certain things like the team graphics, this was very much a bootstrapped production, if I may call it that. But it was a production nonetheless, and we've talked about this for like 2 or 3 seasons ever since we started the show. Basically, we're like, when are we getting LATAM streams? And I think this is the real I think before we had for one event we had some streamed games with no commentary, and now this is another step forward where we did have commentary. We had live casters in the venue, including the goat Swagron. So this was a real step forward, and I think that the next logical step is going to be the full design package. And honestly, what I'm really excited for is the stylistic and aesthetic choices that this stream will take on. So obviously the NA streams look very different from the EU streams. I still really love the big like Coliseum style backdrop. And also the table that the players are battling at looks a lot cleaner than it does in NA, right? But NA has its own style, its own flair, and our own approach. I'm really excited to see what the LATAM streams do because it will look different. It'll look similar, but there will be some signature facets that are unique to LATAM. So speaking of Pokemon and teams, I too did not have a chance to watch all of these games. I do want to go back and watch them because I do record all of the wins and losses for the grand finals. I use that in my notes as I work through the casting through the season. But congratulations to Gabo Herca. This is by far his best finish. I see a lot of 33rd, 25th, middle of the pack finishes, and then he just burst onto the scene here and won in Querétaro. And then we had Paul Garcia coming in second with Grumpig, which is very reminiscent of the Grumpig that also was second in Houston. With some interesting Pokemon here too. Mark Evans with the Galarian Corsola, Obetomac. You and I we're big Obetomac fans. I know he loves listening to this show. So Obed, if you're listening, I hope you're enjoying it so far. Great performance by him. I always shout out to my goat Obetomac. We also had a Togekiss and a Cresselia on Kuro MX's team. Shout out to Arbasora, a trainer that I'm also friends with. We competed in the Mexico City qualifier back when Niantic was still hosting them. And we hung out in Worlds in Hawaii too. So shout out to Arbasora, another wonderful person. Rocha with the Shadow Talonflame and Ashton Ash rocking the same team. This feels like a little Mexico staple here with these two trainers bringing the same exact squads. And then a Shelgon on Javier Cersei TNY's team.
Yeah, I actually believe in Shelgon. I think Shelgon is such an interesting pick now that Feraligatr picks up some pace because you get to the Twister at the same rate they get to the Hydro Cannon, but you're paced to the Ice Beam, so that is always really nice. So I believe Shelgon has a big place in the Feraligatr meta, especially because you also resist Volt Switches from Fortress and have Flamethrower for coverage. So there's a
Mm.
lot to be enjoyed about Shelgon, but yeah, I guess like that's a top 16 pick. The winning Pokemon were mostly the meta staples that we did expect. I really enjoyed the Grumpig shout out yet again. Grumpig,
Mm.
to me, like I was asking myself, what does Grumpig do so well that people are drawn towards it? And I believe it's kind of similar to Medicham to some degree, because you
Mm.
do have the dynamic punch for coverage. You do have some fighting damage and some psychic damage going on, rather. But what Grumpig gives you that Medicham doesn't is neutral matchups into the fairy types that are on essentially every team. Um, so that could be a reason for why you would pick Grumpig rather than Medicham on your team.
Mm.
And another like reason why you could be a Grumpig enjoyer is also that there is access to Shadow Ball, meaning that with an energy advantage, you can actually put a dent into Pokemon like Galarian Corsola, which Medicham just struggles massively with. So I believe that
Mm.
is probably the main draw of Grumpig, the pig. And Unova Stunfisk is probably the most unique to this event standout Pokemon, with actually four Unova Stunfisk in the top eight on the teams of Paul Garcia, Lalo, Obedomac, and also Guais Mani. So,
Mm.
yes, a bunch of really, really interesting new team compositions around that ground electric type, which it looks a lot less imposing than your favorite Steelix, but it does some very similar things. So I wonder
Yeah.
whether that is going to come back into the meta or whether that is just like a regional tendency. I guess we'll find out in the next events.
Yeah, shout out to our other swine slingers in Arbasora with the Grumpig, as well as Kiwi No with the Shadow Grumpig. I have not looked
Oh,
into those matchups in detail, but I do think that's a really cool choice to bring the Shadow. I'll have to do some research there. Lalo coming in fourth place overall. I have a personal competitive history with Lalo. When I competed at the Mexico City qualifiers, Lalo actually defeated me twice, knocking me out of the event. That was the moment when I should have thrown Scald on the Whiscash because it was my only win condition, but instead I opted for the Mud Bomb.
mm,
I don't know if it would have gotten there. Probably not. Alalo would have won regardless, but a very talented trainer from Mexico. And I wanted to shout him out in particular because he is running Jellicent. And I don't know how you feel about the Jellymeister, ZZ, but I've been a big Jelly believer for a while. It has less targets now than it did in the Precious Path season, but I still think there's a lot of viability here, especially when you do see the Quagsires, the Empoleons, the Azumarils, and other targets like that. I mean, do you think that Jelly
So
is solid or what?
I rewatched the prediction for our Memories in Motion, um, like Are They Back, Are They Not segment. And one of my reasons why I didn't place Medicham higher was because I thought there would be so many Jellicent that Medicham may just find it difficult to find an opening. And yeah, there weren't really many Jellicent at all. And I think that has in part to do with Fortress being a vote switching menace. But if it's now a bug biting menace, that could open up some Jellicent gameplay again. Because for a Ghost, it actually has a fairly respectable weekly tough matchup where it doesn't outright beat it, but it at least is able to sufficiently sponge the charge attack energy from a Wigglytuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things where we don't really know how the meta is going to shake out until it finally makes itself apparent. So I don't know. We say that, but then there's also a Galarian Moltres and a Shadow Drapion in top three. So the Jellymeister, it looks a little turbulent. It might not have a great time, but I really love highlighting our LATAM trainers. I'm always going to be consistent about that. All of my journeys down to down south, down to Mexico, down to Peru, down to Brazil, wherever I might go. These trainers are so passionate and they really love our game. And this feels like an easy layup victory for Pokemon to lean into our mobile first LATAM community. So I'm very happy to get our first broadcast. I think it's the first of many. And when that Spanish channel does come out, I hope everyone follows it. I hope everyone subscribes to that because due to the time zones and overlap, I don't think it's possible to have both the English version of a broadcast and the Spanish version on the same channel. You're gonna have to follow
Yeah.
Pokemon Go, ESP, or whatever they decide to call it. But yeah, I definitely think we need to show our support, and I need to watch back those grand finals too because I bet they're pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, the same goes for me. It was a very turbulent week, so I didn't get around to it just yet. But yeah, I'm glad that we have a bot because for the bulk of our LATAM events, we do not have the opportunity to even look up the place of our competitors again. So I believe the YouTube channel is called Karma Beam or something like that, where you have
Mm,
the VODs of all the events, like this TCG and VG um, broadcasts as well, just like all the games. So
yeah.
yeah, definitely check that out. And yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that would be everything that I have on Querétaro. But there's still a little bit of distance that we have to cover in this episode, I believe.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. Well, let's keep the momentum going. We've got one more event to talk about, and then we have a brief overview of the TPC region events, and then we're going to talk about the NAIC meta and what we know so far. So there's a big asterisk next to that last one because there's still a Moosehead update. There's a lot of changes coming. But let's talk about South Africa here. We had 8 players competing. A South African did defend the title there, that being Curdy Wordy and his Umbreon. Shout out to PvPSteve. I mean, you and I both thank the PvP gods that we have PvPSteve because he definitely dives into a lot of these events, especially in Oceania that don't get as much coverage. And he does have the footage of these games. This is a Swiss style bracket, only 3 rounds. So it was a quick tournament, only 8 players. But Curdy Wordy was undefeated, winning all 3 of his rounds. And he took on Divishan, which, fun fact that Steve pointed out, Divishan won this event last year. So it was the
Yeah,
defending champ versus the new champ.
it's nice that we now have two people from South Africa with the regional champion shirt. So actually,
Yeah.
just kind of elevating the profile of the region by crowning yet another champion. And yeah, we see the Jellymeister that we just talked about as another prominent feature on Curti Wurdy's team, alongside
Hey.
obviously the standout Umbreon. I could see those two actually work in tangent quite well with Jellicent being a Pokemon that is pretty good at drawing out a Wigglytuff and therefore freeing up an Umbreon in the back with its strong neutral matchups.
Well, if you look at the move sets here, Curdy Wordy was running Disarming Voice, Chilling Water on his Florges and also Volt Switch on his Fortress. So when you look at this Grand Finals matchup, you did have a Shadow Quagsire from Divishan and a Shadow Malamar. I think this is an easy time for Divishan to just bring that Shadow Quagsire because you don't have Trailblaze on Florges and you don't have Bug Bite on Fortress. So you have to find a different way to beat that Pokemon. I think a lot of it came down to the bulk and the reliability of the Umbreon. But just a quick roundup, just briefly here, some interesting meta picks. Lego sets with Swampert and Quagsire, double Mud Boy. You love to see it, as well as Solar Beam Ninetales with Ember. We did have Gasai with Empoleon, another Jellicent, as well as the Alolan Ninetales. Obi-Wan Kenobi, you gotta check that, Jedi. There might be a copyright infringement claim there. You've got Clefable and Talonflame. I want to shout out as well Billy the Bravebird with the Aegislash and Galarian Moltres duo, which we did see earlier on in Houston, or excuse me, in Orlando, if I'm not mistaken. And then two Quagsires out of the top three, which is pretty cool. But I have some match results for our grand finals if you'd like to hear them.
Oh, yeah, please.
Once I locate my notes, I will have those on deck for us. It'll only take me a
I
moment
know
here.
that Dracoviz defaults to calling everything a 2-0, which may not be entirely accurate.
Yeah, it's
But
one of those things where because it was Swiss, a lot of the matches were just a 2-0. There was no best of 5 in this environment, but I do have some game results thanks to PvPSteve, not sponsor, but it should be. So game 1, Curdy Wordy led his fortress into Divishan's Galarian Corsola. Curdy really in this game just needed to find an opening for Umbreon because that was such an obvious pick for him to bring. You could bet that Divishan was going to bring his Wigglytuff every game, which he did. Um, Kurt goes his Shadow Quagsire. Divishan sends out the Wigglytuff, and that means that the Umbreon is free to go in the mid game. So that was an easy game 1 for Curdy Wordy. Game 2, Divishan strikes back, and he does so in the lead. So Curdy leads Umbreon, Divishan leads Wigglytuff. Checkmate, we gotcha. And Curdy insta swaps to Florges. He absorbs a chilling water, throws a Swift on his Wigglytuff to weaken the Florges, and then goes to Quagsire. Again, no Trailblaze on the Florges. So it's very easy for something like a Quagsire to bring it down. Curdy Wordy sends out his Quagsire, absorbs an Aqua Tail, and then he catches a Nightshade on his Umbreon, but it's still not enough to win because the inevitable Wigglytuff resurfaces.
yeah.
Game 3, Curdy picks up an incredible lead, Umbreon into Galarian Corsola, and this is doubly bad for Divishan because he went Galarian Corsola lead with Shadow Malamar and Wigglytuff in the back. So he's kind of ABA soft to this Umbreon, which is really tough. Divishan pivots into his Malamar, but he basically has no answer. If I remember right, Curdy just shields his Corsola, or excuse me, shields his Umbreon once and takes down the Malamar. Curdy brings his Clodsire into the Wigglytuff matchup, and then Clodsire eventually delivers the final KO. Wigglytuff is only 2 charms away from its next move, though, so this was pretty competitive from Divishan, just really unable to really wrap it up. So if you want to watch the full video, I will provide a link over to PvPSteve's coverage of it. He covers not only the grand finals, but a lot of other matches from Curdy's run. So shout out to PvPSteve, one of our goats. And yeah, you know what, ZZ? I'm starting to get the feeling that whenever there's a Wigglytuff in the meta, things are kind of RPS.
You would think so, but then there's also matchups where, like with Elam versus Doonbug, where the hardest Wigglytuff answer really is just a Corviknight, and all of a sudden Wigglytuff becomes a safe swap. So I don't know. Maybe if you can't beat them, join them.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Well, speaking of joining them, it sounds like Curdy Wordy is able to join the South African champions there after winning Cape Town. Does get his Worlds qualification. That's very exciting. I hope he can make it because I don't think Divishan was able to travel to Worlds in Anaheim last year. So I hope he's able to come out. But South Africa fun event. I think these smaller events are important. I know there's very divisive opinions on these, but this is a good chance to build your local community, to have a tournament that's not going to be infested with Palasha and Its Accent and Doonbug and Stone Collection, right? This is just a good, honest tournament you can compete in. And I hope that we go from 8 to 16 players or 24 players or however many next year. I think that'd be really exciting. But yeah.
Yeah, like that's what these tournaments used to be. Like the regional events used to be really for the region, whereas as of now, like okay, you have this regional and there's Europeans traveling, there's Brazilians traveling, it happens somewhere in the US. Maybe there's the odd APAC player who tries to win it all for an instant qualification.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do enjoy those events that may not be as big in scale as the ones that we see on the broadcast, but give an opportunity to a scene that is otherwise cut off from the circuit. So always a big fan of those happening for sure.
Me
Um,
too.
Speaking of APAC competitors trying to punch their tickets to Worlds, that is also starting up again with just a lot of events happening throughout the spring. Mostly in a style of okay, we have the qualifiers first and then we get the playoffs. And we did
Mhm.
already see the Indian region, home to our very own world champion Beelzeboy, as well as a bunch of other top competitors. starting off with their qualifying tournament, essentially allowing people to punch their ticket to the playoffs. And from then on out, I believe they have an increased number of qualification slots compared to last year, and I believe it was quadrupled even. I think it went from
Yeah,
4 to 16, if I'm not mistaken. Which
correct.
I know that like there's going to be issues with the visa process most likely again, but in case the qualifying trainers are eligible and are able to get their paperwork done in time, which I do not envy them for every tournament that happens in the US because that is a very tough prospect to face. But if they can make it, which I thoroughly hope, there's going to be a lot more trainers from this very, very talented and honestly in grassroots often dominant region, including players who now made at least the playoffs, like Master here, who we saw I think make a
Mhm.
top 8 finish last year. It was like very very high up. Nava Empire, who is also one of the most infamous grassroots players from the Indian continent, as well as players that we've seen before, like Shagun Bora, Fake Soul. Those are names that I recognize, but also
Yeah.
players who I've seen around the community. I believe Tiger Sony 17 is somebody who acts as a moderator for some of the more prominent creators in the scene. Eevee Fun I've seen around, that PvP person I've seen around. Azerox, another name that I've probably seen years and years ago already. People that I recognize from practice tournaments. It's Ryuga, another member of the community who often interacts with the North American side of things as well. So a bunch of trainers who are essentially now at a 50% chance of making it at least towards qualification. Um, and yeah, I believe we are a week away from the playoffs actually taking place. And I know we can always like have the teams up on the screen. There's a bunch of meta trends that are pretty much in line with what we've seen before. Nava Empire prominently on that Piloswine that we saw in Seville, but also players like Vet99 and with Pokemon such as Breloom on their team. So certainly an amount of variety that we are used to seeing from those massive remote APAC qualifiers. So I don't know how serious the Brelooms of this world are, but I'm always a big Breloom enthusiast, so I had to highlight that.
I love how the Breloom just overshadows the fact that there's also a Toxicroak and a Charizard on that team. What in the
Charizard is
world?
like half a real Pokemon. That's like
Oh my gosh.
it feels
Yeah,
nearly serious.
it really is. And then you have AK and Barat with a low punny, it would appear, as well as the
Oh
Galarian
boy.
Moltres and Clefable. So there's a lot of spice. Also, Judgment of Time with Mandibuzz is crazy. And wait, what is that on Dark Phoenix's team? Is that a Morgrim?
Morgrim honestly looks so good into the meta if you just plug in the top Pokemon from previous regionals and try to reverse engineer on PvPoke. So Morgrim may actually be a legit pick. So I would not be
Ooh,
surprised to see more Morgrim action in the actual playoffs.
Morgrim
But
might
yeah,
might be the sauce.
one fun anecdote about the trainer Judgment of Time,
Yeah.
who made it with a Mandibuzz of all Pokemon. They are a frequent competitor in the Candle Cold practice tournaments that I keep shouting out. They have a very
Oh.
good record in those as well. But one fun thing about them is that they are usually the last pairing of the Swiss round that wraps up. So I will not be judging your judgment of time, but certainly it helps
Mm.
to think a matchup through as it appears, because it is reflected in some very impressive success by this particular trainer.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe living up to the name there. Maybe asking not to be judged on the amount of time they need for each round.
It is true.
Also, I gotta shout this one out, ZZ. We have uh three different teams that I can see just kind of no scoping this. We've got Deb Gaming, Ch- Champramesh, and Nava Empire all rocking the Talonflame. So maybe there's something to it. I see a lot of targets for the Firebird there.
Yeah, like if you look at the most used Pokemon, just in the top column, you have Corviknight. Talonflame hard answer stat. Wigglytuff, Talonflame hard answer stat. Medicham, same thing. Fortress, yet again. And then there's also a 34.4% Gourgeist usage, just slightly trailing Quagsire to come in as the sixth most used Pokemon. So that's already five hard targets for Shadow Talonflame. People should make sure
Mm.
to bring their Shadow Talonflame counters because if this is the meta, it does look kind of saucy for the actual players.
It really does. Ever since Vroom Vroom Pal won the Sylph World Championships, I've known that India was legit, and Beelzebub proved that it's arguably the most legit place to compete. And these TPC events are always they always feel such like excuse me, they always feel like they are such high stakes because you don't have a bunch of regionals all season long. You don't have a point system where you can try to build up your race and locals and cups and challenges. You don't have that. You basically have an online competition and then you have a playoff and then that's it. And you get one shot
Yeah,
to really get
no
into it.
second
So
chances.
no second chances whatsoever. So these trainers that compete, they were forged in the fires of competition and they know exactly what to do when the stakes are at their highest. So I'm always very, very proud of our trainers from India and APAC in general because they are so strong, so competitive. Um, you know what also has been fun to watch? The Japan qualifiers, which
Oh,
famously, everyone, if you don't know this, famously they take place at Pokemon centers. So it's like, oh, I want to qualify for Worlds. I'm going to start my journey by going to the Shibuya Pokemon Center and battling whoever's standing in there, and that's how I'm going to earn my chance to get into the PJCS. That's
that's fun.
crazy. That's so cool. Well,
If we lived in a culture that was as Pokemon obsessed as Japan, like I would
yeah.
enjoy that if that was just like a thing that dominated the everyday culture.
Well, one of my favorite things to do over the Orlando weekend was to read those posts. And all the Japanese trainers, they're also private, so they always have like an emoji covering their face or
Yeah,
whatever it might be. But they have like the bracket behind them, and they say, "Oh, I just won in Osaka. Oh, I just won in Shinjuku. Oh, I just won in Shibuya, wherever it might be." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna make it to the PJCS, and I'm so excited." And I was just going through it. I felt like one of the old people on the slot machines. I was just liking every single one of them. I was like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." Ishikawa boy too. Yeah, 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 yeah. I like all these, right? I'm just really, really excited for the PJCS. And as a reminder to everyone, the NAIC is the final chance you have to earn championship points, but the PJCS takes place 1 week after that. So if you want to get another good look at the meta going into Worlds, that is your really legitimately your final chance. So we've
especially
sorry,
because NAIC, as we mentioned, is going to be a custom meta and will not actually display what we are likely going to see at Worlds, just assuming that Worlds will be held as a open Great League format, the way it has
yeah,
been in the past.
yeah. And again, I don't have like the down low on that. I honestly don't know if it's going to be limited or if it's going to be open great. I feel like personally, if you do 80% of the season in open great league, you shouldn't just toss in a limited meta for worlds because then it feels like, well, what were we preparing for all this time? But that's my opinion. I don't know how other people feel.
Yeah, I'm thinking the
Well,
same. I would be surprised if we saw something different. I cannot rule it out, however. But yeah, I believe that we are nearing the end of our breakdown. Is that so? Let me check our notes real quick. Oh,
I
yeah.
think that might be it.
Yeah, like we had the NAIC meta announcement, which was kind of wrapped up in the Orlando shenanigans that were much more serious than we had hoped for them to be. NAIC will allow fairy types, normal types, psychic types, and water types, while banning dark types, grass types, and steel types. And there's also a ban list of like 2 dozen Pokemon essentially, so it'll actually be much more limited in what we actually get to use. But typically, my first look at a meta comes when the rankings are up on PvPoke, especially the weighted rankings. There's been unweighted rankings floating around that highlight strong, bulky psychic types such as Hypno or Grumpig being potentially excellent. But there's probably competition from many of the bulky normals that we are used to, and potentially even some of the fairy types that are viable as well, because that is just essentially traditionally a very strong type in the meta. And obviously water types, they come in all different flavors as well.
Mm,
So yeah, I'm just
yeah,
like looking at this. Is there like an angle for Ludicolo to do anything astonishing down the psychic
I
types?
think
But then there's
so,
also the normal
actually.
types. Like, I'll be surprised. I'll be curious to see how that will shake out, and I'm looking forward to practice as well. But up until New Orleans, we still have just about 2 months to go, and plenty of Open Great League competitions before that. So yeah, I
Yeah,
guess like we'll give it a deeper look once we know a little more about practice usage, about PvPoke rankings, and then we'll do a deep dive into the NAIC meta when the time allows for it. Other than that, I feel like I could lead us over to releases in terms of Pokemon Go PvP that are upcoming or have already happened. For example, Mimikyu is already in the game, but it is not PvP legal yet. You cannot actually select it in battle. The theory is that maybe they are waiting for the actual PvP refactor to introduce that mechanic because as of now, it can be selected in rocket battles, but it cannot be selected in PvP battles. And those happen on slightly different systems. So there's a theory that maybe once the actual update has like is dropping without the previously encountered bugs, Mimikyu may also make its PvP debut. And Mimikyu's special mechanic is that once you take the first hit with it, the first charge attack, you will be able to negate all the damage without using a shield, but your defense will also drop permanently. Cannot even
mm,
reset that through a switch out, which is a very unique and interesting mechanic. I have no idea how overpowered or how underpowered that is going to be, but that is what Mimikyu is going to do. Other than that, we are, as of right now, um, about a day of local time away from the Tinkaton Community Day, where
yes.
it's a Tinkatink Community Day technically, but will evolve into Tinkaton with the Gigaton Hammer. So yeah, get to grinding because it's not only a fun shiny, but it's also going to be PvP relevant with Gigaton Hammer, a steel type attack. I believe 60 energy and 130 damage. That's a clone of moves like Platypus Blades, and Origin Pulse. I butchered that, and it was half on purpose, but I didn't originally intend to. So a very, very strong damage per energy attack that may actually propel Tinkaton into um, some contender status for the Open Great League as well as the Ultra League. Then, after that, there will be the Sustainability Week event, and that prominently features Galarian Corsola, which is not only able to be hatched from eggs, but also on 50% hatch distance, by the way. But also you can encounter it from doing routes, which then would remove the egg IV floor, which is useful because you do want that 0.15 something Corsola for maximum PvP viability. Also, it will come with rose tainted glasses, apparently. I don't know why it has that costume, but it looks cute. So make
Yep.
sure to hatch and catch those Corsola. Other than that, we will see the Silicobra Sendaconda line, which is not going to be PvP relevant, as well as Orthworm for the end of the month, where it is debuting in the Steel Resolve event that will come with, I believe, that is the event that also has a Taken Over part, which means new rockets, like a new rocket event, allowing us to TM away frustration and introducing new shadow Pokemon, most prominently Jupiter, which can evolve into Araquanid. Shadow Bugbite, we just saw it with Fortress, very powerful in this current meta. I believe I've walked us through all the events that are upcoming for the rest of April. So, anything to add, Speedy, or was this it after recording
Uh,
for 3.5 hours roughly?
Oh, I know it. Yeah, for all of us, for all of our listeners who didn't hear the previous episode and just tuned in for this one, we did do 2 episodes in one day. So ZZ and I are we're really running the distance here. So thank you for bearing with us. I'll add just a couple of notes on each one of these. Mimikyu, Home Says Henry did a very good video on Mimikyu. It looks quite strong in Great League as well as Ultra. So make sure to trade away the Mimikyus that you caught on Friday because it's double XLs for trades on Friday only. So make sure to do that. The Ultra League one looks really, really strong. But then again, like you said, it depends on if the ability works the way we think it does and the new PvP system. Gigaton Hammer, From what I've seen online, it looks busted. It looks like a very good move. That's going to be a very powerful Pokemon. Galarian Corsola, I call it the Elton John glasses, is essentially what it has. It looks really, really cute. And this is a great chance, like you said, to get a good IV Corsola without needing to do low friendship trades, which are really, really tough. Also, shout out to Benji in Mexico, who actually traded me my rank 22 Galarian Corsola that I already have. I might need to build a new one. So it looks like that's what's on in the stars for me. ZZ, you overlooked the fact that you called both Sandaconda and Orthworm boring in the notes. So I really I really appreciate the candor there. That's very funny. New Shadows prominently Dupitor, as you know, boys go to Dupitor to get more stupider. And a Shadow Araquanid could be a beast. Hopefully also we get the return of Shadow Onyx. I'm really hoping that it gets tossed
Yes.
into the rotation, please.
I will be on the grind, and I will also be on the grind for a Shiny Shadow Magikarp, because even though Cliff was the one
Oh.
Rocket Leader that I was targeting, it is also the only Shadow Shiny that I haven't gotten yet, so kind of cursed. However, there is still a couple of weeks for me to hunt for that red Gyarados, um, so just hoping for the best, and if not, it probably will remain in the male Water-type grunts, so
Mm.
I at least have that going for me.
That's fair. Odds are reduced, but it's not zero, right? So there's still a chance. ZZ, I got to ask you. I spent a lot of time working with production to get our NAIC meta reveal graphic. It wasn't the star of Orlando, but I just need you to validate it here. Does the graphic look good? Be honest.
I really enjoyed the fact that the bands were listed alphabetically and we got the Wigglytuff reveal right at the end. I think that was like very, very smartly done. So I will give you credit on that.
We get the ZZ stamp of approval, everyone. That's worth its weight in gold. Thank you so much, my friend. All right. Well, everybody, we've got about 80 or so days, give or take, until NAIC. That is your last chance to get championship points and qualify for Worlds. Keep in mind your cutoffs across the various regions and leaderboards. Make sure to check out the official Play Pokemon website to get all that sorted. And also, make sure to keep on checking the Play Pokemon socials because I hope, as we all do, that we get an announcement soon regarding Orlando. But as of right now, as of the recording, we have not seen anything yet. So fingers crossed we get some clarification on that and that it is to everyone's approval. Now, that being said, ZZ, we've done 2 episodes back to back. This has been a long haul, but I think they've been very, very good episodes. Looking forward to recording more with you soon. We're going to have Prague coming up in EU, and then we have LA shortly after that. But that being said, the TPC region is firing up too, so we'll cover those as best we can. And we might even experiment with some new content formats in case we want to get a little soundbite out to all of you without recording a full episode. So we'll see. We're always thinking of things. It just comes down to time and execution, really.
Yes. And as of now, we're thinking about how to better handle those time and execution issues. So
Yeah.
like we'll stay optimistic about how things develop, and yeah. I'll be at Prague. I'll be excited to talk about it once things wrap up.
Well,
Yeah, it's home stretch.
if I've heard any rumors, they may be that there are trainers from NA that will be attacking Prague and trying to take the
I'm
trophy. So,
I'm looking forward to some of them tying for 17th. So
okay, let's see if they take
uh,
that personally, like Michael Jordan did on his fantastic documentary. But that being said, ZZ, it's been a great episode. Thank you so much. I hope everyone appreciates our insights and opinions and real life reactions to Orlando and also our insights into the meta. Always a pleasure, my friend. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. Get some rest, and we'll be right back with more coverage on the Show 6 podcast. Bye.